Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Rob Liefeld Day. It is Thursday, so we are looking at the next issue in his creator-owned series for Image Comics when they started out in the early 90s. This is Youngblood, specifically Youngblood number 4, cover dated February 1993. So a few things I remember as a kid from this issue. One, the weight. Image Comics were known for being late, at least in the early days and first few years of Image Comics. I wouldn't complain too much about Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, and Jim Valentino. For the most part, they were pretty much on time with their deadlines. They also focused on single characters and only kind of moved into secondary stories with different artists and writers later on, once they've kind of established their base kind of series with Spawn, Savage Dragon, and Shadowhawk. The guys who tended to be late were Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, and Mark Silvestri, who focused on team books, more characters to draw, right? And also starting up the studios with secondary artists and secondary series and stuff, and becoming the editors and overseers of those series, spreading themselves a little thin, and their books were the ones that tended to be late. And in this case, Rob Liefeld. So I remember issue 2 being a little bit late after issue 1. Issue 3 was a little bit late after issue 2, but there was a long gap between issue 3 and 4. So much so that I didn't even end up getting this issue at my local comic book shop. Back in the day, I lived in North Bay, Ontario, and after weeks and weeks of going to my comic book shop and waiting for it and it not showing up, we were on a family trip kind of just a little ways up north of North Bay to a place called Sudbury. Was able to convince my parents to stop in at a comic book store, and lo and behold, this comic book store had Youngblood number 4, so I bought it there. Just to show you kind of how comic book distribution worked in the early 90s. I guess it was kind of chaotic. So one place that's even more northerly than North Bay does have the issue, and somewhere more to the south, closer to the States, does not. Just weird. Not quite sure how that works. But anyways, got my hands on it and right away felt a little bit different even from the cover. And there's two reasons for that. Danny Miki jumped in on issue 3 with the inking, but I feel like he was still being very, very true to Rob's pencils. And here on issue 4 already, he's still being pretty close to what Rob's laying down, I think, or I feel. But there's a little bit of the Miki-isms, if I can put it that way, that are starting to creep their way in, which will make him a super awesome inker. I think he's one of the best inkers out there. But we'll start to see some of his ticks kind of slowly creep in there over top of Rob Liefeld's art. Maybe Rob is still inking the faces. As he said before, he always inked the faces, but definitely the body, the anatomy and some of the details and stuff are starting to look a little bit different with this issue because Danny Miki is inking, and it's no longer Rob Liefeld inking himself. One thing I want to mention about this cover as well are the colors, which are now by Steve Oliff and not Brian Murray. You'll notice throughout the issue as well. Personally, I think it's a detriment, and I think it darkens the book and gives it kind of a dark tone. Not that it didn't have that tone before, but for some reason, I do feel that the brighter color palette of Brian Murray and what he was doing up to now works better with Youngblood and Rob's art than Steve Oliff's does. Steve Oliff is known as the top colorist, right? He worked on Savage Dragon a while. He always worked on Spawn for sure. I think I would kind of argue the same thing for Savage Dragon, where I feel like Steve Oliff is very well suited to Spawn. Don't think it works quite as well on Youngblood and Rob Liefeld's art, and nor does it work as well on Savage Dragon and Eric Larson's art, right? So, and maybe even just the tone of the book, right? It makes sense that Spawn's a bit darker. Youngblood, to a certain extent, even though he's got the kind of badass 90s characters, Chapel, Super Punisher, whatever, I just feel that the colors should be much brighter and more primary than what's in this issue here. So two kind of changes. One that was made last issue that has a bit more impact here with the inking, and the coloring also has an impact on kind of the final look of the book. And the cover, I mean, nothing wrong with it, just a typical kind of Rob Liefeld team shot. I do think that the background here was not done by Rob Liefeld, though, and probably this whole thing fully was done by Danny Miki or some assistant in Extreme Studios. Let's have a look inside. Right away, the simpler kind of design here, and I don't mind that it's black and white. It used to have, did it have color elements? I'm not 100% sure, but I know that he'd always kind of have that pin up there. And early Image issues kind of had the credits page, and they always had a pin-up kind of shot there, and they kind of moved away from that, and I really like that. I actually used that on my own comic series, Big Baby, where my kind of credit page, when you open up the book, is pretty much based on the old school kind of Image thing, in that I always include some sort of pin-up of my character on that credits page, usually a parody of something, an advertisement or a movie. So what you'll notice with the inking, I think, is just the general level of slickness is you know, a little bit more apparent, I think, overall, and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a little less personality than when Rob Liefeld inks himself. It's not that it's bad. You know, out of all the people who've inked Rob Liefeld, I definitely think Miki is probably one of the best to do it. But there's just, again, as soon as an artist is not inking himself, there's something that tends to be lost when someone else inks it. Sometimes it creates something new, and that's cool. And again, I don't know if that's the case here, but I do think he does a really good job. But there's just, you know, some of that dirty roughness that I like in Dale Keown as well when he inks himself is kind of lost when Danny Miki, you know, starts maybe interpreting more strongly his own style into Rob's pencils, you know, which is slowly going to happen over a few issues with Youngblood. Anyways, I think so. When we move on to next issue, we'll talk about it. And I'm also including Youngblood Strikefall in there because I do believe that Miki was inking him on that as well. Gotta wonder about the backgrounds always, right? Is there a credit for technical assistant or something? Lettering, editor, color set. Okay, doesn't say anything. So maybe Rob did do those backgrounds. It's possible. If he did, pretty good job for the inside of the ship here. It's pretty evocative. A rare kind of, you know, fully backgrounded image by Liefeld, even though it's just a bunch of characters sitting there. It's kind of cool. Double page splash. Another double page splash. So we've got some weird formatting in this issue. Maybe there's other stuff I can point out, but like right away, you know, it is this white bar here. So it's like the hand should have continued full bleed, but even then it would have been cut off a bit. So it's a weird choice. You know, again, I could believe that maybe Liefeld's inking the face here. Maybe some of Bedrock. I think he's still called Bedrock at this point here. But, you know, some of the kind of sheenier, cleaner, almost Scott Williams type inking here, and is definitely Miki. And the hands in Miki's inking start to change and morph a little bit and not be quite like Rob Liefeld usually draws hands, right? Usually, you notice the level of detail kind of drops on the hands generally with Rob Liefeld, but there's just something here that's maybe I would say more akin in the hatching and stuff to what Jim Lee would do rather than Rob Liefeld for the hands here. So I definitely think that's Danny Miki's doing. Maybe some technical assistance on the ship here, I'm not sure. And, you know, not a texture that I've seen Rob Liefeld use much, but I mean, he's creating some backgrounds here. And I gotta say, you know, even though we just got kind of, you know, dark towers and chimneys, I like the way that dark smoke is kind of done here, almost very dirty. Almost, I would say, like, you know, if you only showed me this, I would guess like Howard Chaykin did that, and that's way off aesthetically from Rob Liefeld. But just that to me, in a weird way, looks like Howard Chaykin kind of stuff, and you don't really notice it because it's kind of attenuated by the computer coloring and stuff. But the clouds in the background and the swirling clouds up here, I think, look pretty darn cool once you kind of pay attention to it. I don't think the coloring helps it in any way. You know, you don't really notice it. If there had been some light kind of orange and yellows in some of these clouds here, maybe that would have helped, you know, just to help bring them out a bit. And yeah, you can see, like, from these two pages, these are pretty good examples, kind of the dark nature of the coloring. And sometimes it's like, I don't know if it's a production snafu either, because, for example, Bedrock here gets really dark compared to how he was here. This page is fairly light, as is this one here. Like Die Hard, if we compare from here to here, all of a sudden everything just darkens, right? Here we've got white for his costume, which is normal. That's what and here we get almost no white. It's just gray. There's a bit of white in the highlights, right? And then it just goes straight to gray here. I guess they're trying to convey maybe the idea they're inside a place and the lights are out or something, but there's some wide-ass X hatching on Bedrock's leg there. That's the stuff that I guess the Liefeld haters point to. I mean, it's part of his style. Sometimes, you know, it doesn't kill my liking his artwork at all. Whoever's doing backgrounds at this point is bringing back these Weapon X inspired kind of abstract, shapy backgrounds, which I think are cool and work really well from Rob Liefeld. And I think this is one of the last issues where we'll see him using some of that. So you've got more on this page here. And again, more of that dark coloring. I just feel like, you know, it's a dark filter that could be pulled back just to make things clearer. The colors tend to kind of mix together and have the same value, right? So things flatten out. They're not quite as separated from the background, even though, again, the use of all these abstract you know, ovals and shapes I think are great, and one of the last times he's going to use it. And here's I was talking about yesterday's review with Dale Keown about the way he draws veins. Rob Liefeld, I've mentioned before, is like he'll see something from other artists and how they do things, and he likes it so much that he incorporates it into his art. And at first, it's just a little too obvious where he's gotten it from, and slowly but surely, he kind of integrates it and it becomes his. So here's an example I think of, you know, Rob Liefeld, you know, Dale Keown's kind of coming in and up in the world, and he's probably seen the pit pages that are to be in this issue. When we get to the end, you'll see there's the I've mentioned before, the first kind of pit short story, and the X-shaped veins that I talked about. You know, Rob Liefeld wasn't doing that before, so he's definitely started incorporating it here, and I definitely think it's because he saw Dale Keown do it. If you look back on the cover here, we kind of have that same kind of vibe here, and he wasn't doing that before, like in X-Force and stuff. So I definitely think he kind of ripped that off, or you know, homaged Dale Keown with those veins, and he'll homage Dale Keown later on in other ways, which I mentioned before in past reviews. I'll talk about again during the pit run. So yeah, nothing, I mean, horribly wrong with the art here. Miki is still doing an awesome job with the inking. Definitely think he's doing some of these backgrounds here, right, that kind of definitely reproduce what was happening on the cover. As a kid, I have to tell you, it was lost on me at first, at least in the first few years. The Die Hard is basically just a Captain America ripoff, right? Like, it's so obvious now with the shield and everything, but I was kind of oblivious back then. Didn't know that much about comics history, and I just didn't see them as analogs at first, right, to characters that already existed. But then you learn about the history of, you know, Prophet definitely being an inspiration himself of Captain America, and OMAC. You know, Shaft was originally meant to be Speedy, right, at DC Comics. Chapel, I'm not quite sure what his origins are exactly. You know, generally he's touted as kind of a Punisher type character, right? That makes sense. He's got big guns, skull on his face. Die Hard is the Captain America. Bedrock is the Thing, right? I mean, that's kind of a waste of a splash right in this issue. All of a sudden, just one big shot of Bedrock punching Disciple, popping out of frame. See the other side of his feet here, so I guess Bedrock just broke him in half at the hips. More of that abstract kind of backgrounds that I like. Kind of interesting dark shot here, lots of shading on Prophet's face. I think this is kind of a bold experiment generally for Rob Liefeld here. Maybe a better version of him doing somewhat of a Sin City kind of look, because he's done it. He'll do it later on with that Shadowhawk issue he does, and not quite to this effect. I think it looks pretty cool here, actually. So Die Hard rushes off. They find, remember, talked about last issue, Youngblood review, how we thought Sentinel was dead. No, he's not. Neither are any of the other Youngblood away team members. And here's where we're going to get to see a few more kind of homages or ripoffs that Rob Liefeld's incorporated into Youngblood. So I've talked about it before, but I assume we are probably in and around the time where Rob Liefeld really discovers the New Gods, or rediscovers it, or gets into it, however you want to put it. And what you're basically seeing here is a boom tube, right? How the New Gods and the denizens of Apocalypse and Darkseid and his minions, how they could travel back and forth from those planets to Earth, right, was through a boom tube, which is like, I guess, basically just a dimensional portal, right, from one place to another across time and space. So Die Hard and Bedrock, knowing that the Assailants' disciples come in from in this case, I don't know what they're called. They don't call them boom tubes, of course. They call them tunnels here. My guess is that these tunnels function as a wormhole, allowing passage to some other place or time. I hadn't read that recently when I just described it to you. So they just guess, right? So they just take the chance, which is funny. You would of course just jump through a wormhole, right? Wouldn't you? And we get just a silhouette here of a character, Master. And I mean, if you don't know that this is basically Desaad and Darkseid, then you really don't know much about Jack Kirby and the New Gods. And when I read this originally, I had no idea. So yeah, I thought these were completely original characters. So we've definitely got kind of a Darkseid Thanos kind of clone here. And again, Desaad, who's kind of Darkseid's assistant, I guess you could call him. I always thought this was weird. Die Hard's got a full face mask, but he gets punched and blood just pours out of the mask. I guess it's another one of those moments of Rob Liefeld just going, it looks cool. And I mean, it does look cool, but it would just make more sense if the characters, maybe the mask was ripped beforehand somehow, or, it was a character who didn't have a full face mask. But anyways, and what's implied from these two panels is that our character here, whose name is Darkthorn, not Darkside, hypnotizes Bedrock, and as the remaining members of Youngblood and Prophet approach the boom tube, or whatever Rob Liefeld calls it, just the tunnel is what everyone seems to be referring to it. And random Berserker character here, just because it looks cool in this 90s vertical panel. We've got Shadowhawk coming out of the tube. Unfortunately, no, that is not Shadowhawk. It is our good friend Darkthorn, accompanied by Bedrock, who's now been brainwashed or hypnotized in service to Darkthorn. Bedrock, no. And there you have it. That's how this issue concludes. And what really pissed me off as a kid and kind of got me off the, this is kind of where I started going off the rails with Rob Liefeld, and where eventually I wouldn't be purchasing his books anymore, at least as a 12 to 13-year-old kid, to be concluded in Brigade number 4. See this issue's letter page for details. So I had bought, I think, the first 2 issues of Brigade and really didn't like it, didn't like the art. And I was just like, you know what? Now I was kind of figuring out how comics work. I'm like, this, the first issue of Brigade, real quickly, I read, and then I kind of came back and I was like, Rob Liefeld, the art's kind of weird. I don't think Rob Liefeld drew this. And then, of course, I realized Marat Michaels drew it. And he's kind of a, not to shit on him or anything, but he's an Extreme Studios guy. And he's kind of a Rob Liefeld clone and not quite as good. So to have to collect Youngblood 4 issues and then move on to Brigade number 4, where I hadn't bought Brigade number 3, and I didn't want to buy Brigade number 4. That really pissed me off. So I did end up buying Brigade number 4. And what pissed me off even more is that Rob Liefeld did not even draw the conclusion in that issue. That is the conclusion, to Youngblood, the first miniseries. He had someone else draw it. And not that the artist that was Chappie Ape, he's a pretty cool artist, fun artist, but the lack of I can never say that word, consistency there, and not having Rob Liefeld draw that next part of the storyline, again, just pushed me away from him further. And I think from that point on, after Youngblood Strike File and stuff, I don't think I really bought any of the Youngblood issues originally as a kid as they came out. I did get a few of them later on, which I will review when we get to those, but there won't be that many there. This is kind of, for me, with this issue, the beginning of the end of my love affair with Rob Liefeld at Image Comics. So here, as I said, vastly different from what we saw yesterday with the last issue that Dale Keown did of the Hulk. Now we're here with, Dale Keown doing some full bleed art, literally on the page, and literally as it's the name of his studio. So I guess that was kind of an artistic intent that he was kind of stating, possibly. But right away, we get some more kind of heavy metal visuals, right? The art is dirtier and grittier and more detailed. Always prefer artists when they ink themselves. So to finally get Dale Keown inking himself here and seeing his interpretation of hatching and stuff, like I said, there's just something a little more kinetic to it compared to what he was doing on the Hulk, I guess is the best way I could describe it. In a weird way, there's almost like a slight manga influence that I can't quite put my finger on, but that works really well here. So yeah, artist and writer Dale Keown, co-writer Brian Houghton, editor, okay, whatever, letterer Ron Kasman, and colors Joe Scioto. Yeah, I mean, this first issue of Pit really kind of establishes a very, very different look for Dale Keown and his art. And even for Image, I don't know if all the Image comics at this point were going full bleed like he is, but he's really taken advantage of that full bleed on the page to really pack the art and layer it. All like these 2 introduction pages look great. So dark, right? It's very 90s. Got some Kirby Crackle, very well done, and I like Kirby Crackle and Jack Kirby, so that works for me. And again, right away establishing that this, the look of the book is going to be much different from what he was doing on Hulk. Definitely grittier. Not cheaping on the panels, though. I got to say the storytelling, at least not at first. Average page here, if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 panels on that page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On that one. And other than the bleed, maybe the layouts and stuff aren't exactly too different from what he was doing at Marvel. Another thing, though, is the black background rather than the white. Really helps to differentiate what he's doing here on Pitt as to what he compared to what he was doing on Hulk. And boom, we got the introduction of Pitt, basically showing up like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, right? Again, back in the day as a kid, I thought it was really cool. And then, you know, and I had seen Terminator, I just hadn't put two and two together. And now, you know, seeing it right now, it kind of just jumped up at me that's definitely where that came from, right? And of course, one of Pitt's, I would want to say personality characteristics, but characteristics nonetheless, is the fact that his claws can grow to extreme lengths when he's aroused. No, I'm just kidding. When he's preparing, I guess, for some sort of violent confrontation. As we're going to get here, he does, it's kind of an old movie trick, right? The train's going by and there's lights, and then there's parts where there's no lights. You get the silhouette. I think that's really cool. Helps kind of mark the passage of time a little bit, and Pitt moving around inside. It's like almost animated. Very well done. Dale Keown is a master storyteller by this point, so, you know, nothing's ever confusing, even though it's very detailed, hyper realistic, lots of shadows. You know, even just a simple panel like this, like just seeing his leg pop out here of the top of the metro or the train, the underground. Just a masterful panel here, simple and effective, right? Clear storytelling. And that's our introduction to Pitt, who's basically, right, the Hulk with normal skin tone and no nose and very, very long heavy metal hair. And his look will kind of stabilize a bit over the next few issues of Pitt #1, which I'll review next week, and the rest of the Pitt series. So kind of a cool introduction. I remember back in the day this got me excited for Pitt, and I couldn't wait for that first issue again, which we will be reviewing next week. So there you go, guys. That's my review of Youngblood #4. You have questions, comments, concerns, little tidbits about this issue, or Rob Liefeld or anyone else involved, let me know in the comments below. If you're still watching as a subscriber, thank you so much for still being around. I really do appreciate it. If you are watching the videos but are not subscribed, please do so below. Like the video. It only takes a quick second for you, not a lot of time at all, and it really helps the channel, helps get us out there to other people who might be interested in the kind of content we create, and who are interested generally in comic books just like we are. So everyone out there watching, thank you so much, and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!